Zaydrius Rainey-Sale is going to put the nation on notice in 2026.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the days. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, I got a really fun show coming at all you everydayers out there. I want to stake some claims. Early on, here in January, yes, it's way too early ranking season, so I'm going to do some way too early stuff myself. I'm going to talk about some guys that I think you need to keep a very close eye on in spring practice that I think are going to be breakout stars. I want to talk about some breakout stars that we're going to see in the two deeps this fall on the offensive side, but I know that's where we normally start here on Locked On Huskies. I want to start on the defensive side of the ball today because I don't think that there's any bigger star on this roster that is ready to break out than sophomore linebacker Zaydrius Rainey-Sale. Obviously, this is a guy who's been a topic of discussion on this show for a very, very long time because he was the top recruit that the Huskies signed in the 2025 class. And after coming off the torn ACL and playing as much as he did this past season, he was tremendous whenever he was on the field. 21 tackles, a sack, a pick, a couple of pass breakups. So all of the numbers were there, and I'm sure you're sitting there saying, well, yeah, obviously this is a guy who's going to break out with, Jacob Manu and Xe'ree Alexander alongside him in that that linebacker room, with whatever Buda Alukta might be able to bring to the table as well as he recovers from the torn ACL he suffered at Washington State last season. But I think that this goes beyond just, hey, this guy's going to go earn a starting spot, earn a spot in the two deep, and be a big part of this rotation. No, I think that this guy can earn all Big Ten caliber honors as a true sophomore. He is that level of talent at 6'3", 225 pounds. I'm so excited to see all the different ways that Ryan Walters is going to be able to deploy a guy like this, because Jedd Fisch has talked about it. Walters has talked about it, where he's not just somebody who can play inside linebacker at that size. They want to walk him down. They want to use him as an outside linebacker who can give you a little bit more as a pass rusher off the edge, or maybe even as a delayed blitzer, different things like that from the inside linebacker spot. And I think that's so important, all of this, because when you go back and you look at his film, not only as a true freshman, but from his time at Bethel High School as well, he is just such an elite athlete. And it's one of those things where when you have a guy that is just that caliber of player, you find as many different ways to deploy him as possible. And we've seen this over the last couple of years, something we've talked a lot about on the show. Washington's new prototype at linebacker being these bigger guys at 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", with a whole lot of length that can move around the formation and give you so many different looks in the front seven. And he is the perfect guy to really, and again, we saw some of it this season, but I think with a full offseason of not just, being in the system and learning the defense and everything, but now a full offseason of being able to train as a college football player instead of recovering from a torn ACL, I think that's going to help him out so, so much. And this is a guy where whatever his role is going to be, whether it's starting alongside Jacob Manu or Xe'ree Alexander, or maybe alongside both of them, depending on how Ryan Walters wants this defense to look, I think that he is just somebody who, if he's one of the top 3 tacklers on this team, I'm not going to be shocked. If he winds up with 5 or 6 tackles for loss, a couple of sacks, maybe a pick here and there, a couple of pass breakouts because of how athletic he is in coverage, none of that should surprise you. And this is just one of those guys where Husky fans already know about him, but in terms of where he is on a national perspective, he's nowhere near the caliber of some of these other true freshman linebackers that we've seen thrive, like Mason Posa from Wisconsin, who obviously earned true freshman All-American honors this past season. He's in that same level of talent. And with what Ryan Walters can do to get creative and deploy a guy like that, I really couldn't be more excited about where he's going to go in this Husky defense in his second year on campus. And it's just another one of those things where, as Ryan Walters has talked about, his defense taking a bigger step forward, or taking a big step forward, from his first season to his second season. Guys like Zaydrius Rainey-Sale being more ingrained in the program and not just trying to pick up the defense and learn it on the fly, as much as this whole coaching staff has talked about him as a great communicator and a tremendously smart kid who picked up the defense so quickly. Now that he is able to just have more reps in spring camp and fall camp and just be a bigger part of the system, he's going to take a massive jump from year one to year two. And again, this is someone who I believe is going to be in line for all Big Ten caliber honors by the time November, December rolls around, because he's just that talented and can be that much of a big part of this defense. Now, just a little honesty here. I tried to keep this as much as possible to guys who we didn't necessarily see play in all 12 games, where I know it's a little subjective with Zaydrius in that regard, but I wanted to challenge myself a little bit, as I do with some of these exercises. And one guy who I just couldn't escape, the more names I wrote down on my little note card here and just tried to toss around, is like, oh, okay, maybe I can go with this guy. Maybe I can go with that guy. I kept coming back to the same name, and that's Dylan Robinson. Because even though he played in all 13 games, started 5 of them in place of Tacario Davis, or started 6, in place of Tacario Davis this past season, I was like, I feel like the everydayers know enough about him, but the more I go back and look over his numbers and what this guy is going to do as a full-time starter, as a true sophomore, I couldn't be more excited. Let's go through the numbers real quick. 16 tackles, 1.5 for loss, a sack of Dante Moore, a pass breakup, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. There are so many reasons to be excited about Dylan Robinson. And I think one of the biggest ones is this is going to be his second true season at cornerback. And that's something that cannot be overlooked, because he's someone who, remember John Richardson talking about this during fall camp, that before he got to UW, and remember, he was a June enrollee. So really it's going to be his first season plus at corner. Is he was always just so used to training at both wide receiver and cornerback. And now that he has just dedicated himself to playing defensive back, the more he's learning on that side of the ball, I think that his technique is going to take a big jump forward. Now that this kid at, 6'3", 205 pounds, now that he's learned more about the physicality of the game, and he was already an extremely physical player in run defense, especially as a true freshman, all of those things are really going to take a big step in this upcoming season. And having a true CB1 on the other side of him in Emmanuel Carnley is going to make him more comfortable to take some chances when it comes to jamming guys off the line and maybe getting aggressive and trying to jump routes and different things like that. So I'm excited to see what it's going to look like for Dylan as a true sophomore, and especially when we look at just how much these cornerbacks are asked to do in run support in a Ryan Walters defense. And I think that this kid in particular is someone who, like Zaydrius, if he's someone who does take a step forward and is, in line to earn some all Big Ten caliber honors, and honorable mention, or whatever that might be, by the end of the season, I wouldn't be shocked, because he is that level of talent. And when you look at how Washington has addressed the transfer portal, I think Dylan is a perfect example of, I know Jedd Fisch talked about it, of this is a guy who we don't need to go out and get, another veteran to try to challenge this kid, because not only do they have some really exciting bodies coming in the class of 2026, but he is someone who proved more than enough as a true freshman that he is worthy and able to hang in the Big Ten. So if he's able to take the step forward that you're looking for, I really just can't say enough big things about what it is that Dylan Robinson could be in his second year at Washington. And one guy who, again, I know I said I gave myself some pretty strict stipulations here, like Washington has a trio of freshman All-Americans. You're not going to hear their names on today's show because we already know that they're breakout stars, right? One guy who was the breakout star of Washington's defense this past season was safety Alex McLaughlin. And, with 93 tackles, 3 for loss, 6 pass breakups, a pair of defensive touchdowns with 1 on a pick 6, 1 on a fumble recovery, had 2 picks on the year. I think that this is a guy who's going to be preseason all Big Ten. He is going to be someone who by the end of the year is going to be an all-American caliber player. And I just want to get that out because, again, today on this show is about staking claims. I want to hear who your thoughts are on who the big breakout star of the team is going to be down in the comments. But I think that Alex McLaughlin, with everything he showed in his first season of Big Ten football, now that he's coming back, continuing to add weight and continuing to just get comfortable as the focal point of this defense, since Ryan Walters just asks his safeties to do so much in terms of run support and tackling and pass coverage as well. I think Alex can stake his claim as one of the 3 or 5 best safeties in the country in 2026. And with that being said, let's jump over to the offensive side of the ball, where I think Champ Taulealea is another guy with superstar potential. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel has given all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boosts on the bets you already feel good about. You can ride with the favorite when you think a team controls the matchup. Take a shot on the underdog if you feel an upset coming, or build a parlay on the players and moments you think decide the game. Then you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. We've also got a message from our good friends over at the Space Needle. After 4 p.m., the Space Needle's Pint and a Pie gives you the whole package. Entry, a savory or sweet tip-top pie, and a pint of beer, wine, or a non-alcoholic drink, all for just $35 per person, minimum purchase of 2 required. Space Needle is Seattle's most iconic destination, not just for the views, but for evening fun. Create a pregame story as iconic as the Space Needle itself. Look out over the city, look down at Climate Pledge Arena before you go inside for a Kraken game, a concert, whatever it might be. That just sounds like an awesome way to spend an evening. I love going up and checking out the Space Needle. Whether it's date night, friend night, or you're just here for the deal of it all, come take your place on the horizon. Only $35 per person, limited time offer, 21 plus only, ID required. Get tickets at spaceneedle.com. Minimum 2 required. Thank you so much to all you everydayers out there for making Locked On Huskies your first watch or first listen of the day. And thank you again so much for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club, where you get access to an ad-free audio-only feed for Locked On Huskies, which is compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. And you get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. And I'm going to be hanging out in there. If you have any questions for me, any different thing like that, you can feel free to check that out as well. Go to lockedonhuskies.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. And just so all you everydayers out there know, on top of the stipulations I set for myself, one of them, if you haven't picked up on it already, is there will not be any true freshmen discussed on the show, because we'll have our own separate discussions about what those guys can bring in their first year on campus. I want to talk about some breakout guys who've already been in the system, been through some practices, and just know a little bit more about what to expect for life in the Big Ten. One of those guys who I think can absolutely just take a massive step forward in year 2 is Champ Taulealea. And one of the reasons I wanted to start with him is I've gotten a lot of questions about Garen Hatchett being back and what that might look like. And he's someone who has talked at length about whatever role he needs to fill for the team, that's what he's going to do. And if he's going to, kind of be a floating 6th offensive lineman for the interior mainly, where he's played some center in career, if he's backing up his brother Landon Hatchett and also backing up John Mills and Champ Taulealea at left and right guard, great. If he winds up beating out Champ Taulealea for the starting job, I'm sure the coaching staff would obviously be more than happy with that. Whatever role he needs to fill, he's going to do it. And I look at Champ at 6'4", close to 340 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark. He is somebody who I was really impressed with throughout both spring and fall camp as a true freshman, because it's obvious if the measurables don't give it away what kind of physical presence he is. And seeing him play in 4 games this season and just getting a little bit of experience under his belt, getting his feet wet against some of the bottom tier Big Ten teams in Purdue, in UCLA, and just getting used to the physicality of the sport, of the level, was awesome, because there were never any questions of if he was going to be, big and strong enough to play at this level and if he needed to develop in that regard. No, absolutely not. And I think that this is one of those things where whatever way you see this Husky offensive line shaping up in 2026, I think that Champ Taulealea is going to be part of that. And I think it's one of the reasons where when you look at why Paki Finau might have transferred, why Zach Henning might have transferred, it's because Washington has big plans for him. They have big plans for Cody Green. Obviously, now getting Cole Dietrich in the building as well. You have 6, 7, 8 guys who can potentially start for you in 2026. And that's obviously a great sign. That's exactly what you're looking for. And when I look at Champ, the fact that he has played a significant amount of snaps already against a couple of Big Ten teams. It's not like they're going to be, obviously there'll still be questions of, oh, hey, how is he going to pass protect against top tier Big Ten teams? Can he do this? Can he do that? For sure. But with how this coaching staff trusted him as a true freshman to go out there and perform in some of those spots, I think that Jedd Fisch, Jimmy Doherty, Michael Switzer are not going to hesitate with asking him to step in and play bigger roles in terms of, whether that be as a starter, whether that be splitting time right down the middle all season with Garrett Hatchett, whatever that might be. And I think that this is just another one of those guys where obviously he was the highest ranked offensive lineman of the 5 members of the 2025 class that came in. But at the same time, I think that he's also just one of those guys where you look at what his ceiling might be if he can continue to develop as a pass blocker with how physical he is and how strong he is as a run blocker. I think that this is just another one of those dudes, and I know I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again because I do believe that he is someone who can be an all Big Ten caliber player by the end of the 2026 season. He just has that kind of talent. And now I'm curious to see if it's going to come to fruition in his second year on campus, because I think that he is just one of those guys who, whenever Jedd Fisch talks about the future, talks about the young guys who are coming back, he is a name that is just always on the tip of Jedd's tongue as someone who, oh yeah, this is a guy we're really excited about. This is a guy we have really, really big plans for. And again, I think that those are things where if he's taking a whole bunch of reps with the first team offensive line come March, April, when spring ball rolls around, I'm not necessarily going to be shocked by that. Now, let's move out wide where there are certainly the most questions about what's next for this position group, now that Denzel Boston is off to the NFL. And I think that you should be really, really excited about Chris Lawson, because I know I am. And one of the biggest reasons that I'm excited about Chris Lawson is, of the 3 wide receivers we saw come in for spring ball in 2025, Chris Lawson was head and shoulders the best performer. Now, obviously, the other 2 guys fit the transfer portal in Marcus Harris and Raiden Weisbrot, but one of those guys, obviously, in Raiden, started 11 games as a true freshman. And Chris, unfortunately, just dealt with a couple of minor injuries that kept him out for the majority of fall camp. And I think if those things had not gotten in the way, and I know I've said this before, as you ever dares know, but I'm going to say it again, I think that he would have been right there in the mix alongside Desmond Roebuck and alongside Raiden Weisbrot to take one of those starting jobs. And it's one of those things where, as we saw his utilization increase as the year went on, where early on he was the guy that was getting some of those deep shot reps out of the Z spot. And then as we saw him move around a little bit more in the formation, I think that that was very, very telling of how this coaching staff views him coming into the season, because I think it's very clear that he is going to have a shot to compete for a starting job. And especially with the amount of reps that we saw him get down the stretch, where this coaching staff could have very easily said, all right, with how we're using Audric Harris, we're going to use you guys in 4 different games apiece, so we don't have to worry about burning either of your red shirts. Obviously, that was not the case. So I think that says a lot about what's going on with just the plan for Chris and how this coaching staff expects him to develop, because he was a guy who was just so reliable throughout spring practice with just his hands, his route running, his feel for just space to just find soft spots in zone coverage. And also in the red zone, he was tremendous at just finding ways to get open. And all of those are things that, it's easy to get really excited about. But the thing I'm most curious about as it pertains to Chris is how he's going to get help from guys that are not named Desmond Roebuck, because we look at now Christian Moss is here with Justice Williams and Rasheed Williams, both coming back off injuries, and whatever you might get from these guys in this true freshman class, and potentially one more transfer receiver. We'll see what that looks like. I think that there is all the potential in the world for this wide receiver room to take a big step forward. And it's just a matter of who is going to have the best chemistry with Damon Williams, who is going to be that guy that separates themselves in one way or another. And I think that when I just think back as to what I saw from Chris Lawson, that he is going to be the guy who can absolutely do that as well as anybody else in this room. One more guy who I'm really excited about, I know this coaching staff is as well, much in the same way where they didn't need to burn his red shirt this past season, but they did because of how they feel about him, is Baron Naone at tight end. Because you look at Cade Eldridge coming back, you look at Decker DeGraff coming back. This coaching staff is very, very high on both of those guys. And Baron is someone who I was honestly right off the bat shocked we didn't see more from him as a true freshman, just because of how this coaching staff talked about him. And I'm sure a lot of that had to do with him enrolling in June. But the more I look at his ability to not only just catch passes and run routes, but his ability as an inline blocker, I think that this is a guy who is going to make a big impact for Damon Williams this upcoming year and in the run game as well, because there are just so many different things that tight ends in this offense are asked to do. And I don't think that we've seen a lot of guys that can function as a true 3-down tight end, where we saw Quentin Moore mainly be asked to function as a run blocker, where I think he could have been utilized a little bit better in the passing game, but the coaching staff wanted to have more of those just responsibilities fall to Decker DeGraff and fall to Cade Eldridge. And I think that as just Washington continues to progress in terms of developing that room here at UW, I think that we should see more guys that can function in that role. I know I got a question from one of our everydayers on YouTube about doing more on tight ends in particular, because it can be a little bit of a giveaway with who's on the field in terms of what the play call is and different things like that. And I do want to dive into that more later on. But I want to talk about Baron in particular for right now, because he is one of those guys who in his second season, with the physicality that he's shown as a blocker, and with just how this coaching staff feels about him, if he's able to just continue adding weight and continue refining his technique as an inline blocker and as a receiver, where if he's just turns into one of these go-to guys over the middle of the field for Damon Williams, I'm not going to be all that shocked. And I think that he's someone who, again, with the athleticism and all these different things that he brings to the table, is someone who still could split out wide and line up in the slot for you, line up isolated at the top of the formation if you needed him to do those sorts of things. Because again, he just does have that sort of talent. I'm just curious to see if we're going to see it all come together for him in his second season. With that being said, let's get to some honorable mentions who have been tossing around in my head for a while. Moving right along, a lot of these guys are players that I'm really, really excited about that for one reason or another, we just haven't seen a whole lot of. So I got 2 on the offensive side of the ball, 2 on the defensive side. And the guy I want to start with here is running back Quaid Carr, because there are so many opportunities for guys during spring and fall camp to move their way up the depth chart, where we know what the top end of this room is going to look like, right? Where it's going to be Jaden Lamar. We're going to see Jordan Washington. We're going to see something from Brian Bonner. Quaid Carr is somebody who he did enroll in June, so he got a little bit of a late start to the 2025 season, but it was very clear once he got here that this kid belongs, where he was a late flip from San Diego State to Washington just a couple weeks before signing day, and I was so impressed with what he showed throughout fall camp last season. And he's someone where the contact balance is really nice. The physicality, it certainly was not a big adjustment for him from playing in the Trinity League at Servite to coming up here to the Big Ten and everything like that. And that was really cool. That was really fun to see. And combining that with his long speed, this is someone who, if he becomes one of the top kickoff or punt returners for this team going into the 2026 season, I'm not necessarily going to be shocked, but this is just someone who I think is going to be a bigger part of this offense than some people think. And it's certainly nothing to make up for the loss of Adam Muhammad, where that obviously still hurts this offense in a variety of ways. But with what a guy like Quaid Carr can bring you alongside a Jordan Washington, a Brian Bonner, a Jaden Lamar, I think that he is someone who is just going to surprise a lot of people this season. And I'm going to be keeping a very, very close eye on, because it's very clear that Jedd Fisch is happy with what he's seen from him. Scotty Graham is certainly in that same ballpark. And as spring camp begins, if this is a guy where, we're talking about him on this show, you're reading about him over on Huskies Wire or wherever else you like to get your UW news, don't be surprised if Quaid Carr's name is one that comes up over and over again, because he showed that he is absolutely a very talented back who can certainly give you exactly what you need on just not even just as a running back, but as a pass catcher as well in the Big Ten. Sticking on the offensive side of the ball here, I got to go with one of my biggest, just most exciting talents on this team, in my opinion, and that's Justice Williams, where this is a guy who you everydayers know. We've talked about him a lot over the past couple of weeks. I was so impressed with everything that I saw from Justice in spring and fall camp in 2025, and it's unfortunate that we didn't see more of him on the field, where obviously he was dealing with an injury for the last month plus of the season that kept him out. And I think we would have seen a lot more of him once Denzel Boston got hurt if he were healthy and able to get in the rotation. And this is something where he missed all of the 2024 season as well while rehabbing an injury that he suffered at the high school level. So it's unfortunate that has just really put a damper on the early part of his career, because when he was on the field, it was very clear that at 6'4", 210 pounds, this is a guy that, like Quaid Carr, I feel silly to say this, but it is very important, who absolutely belongs at this level of college football, because everything that you want to see from a guy like that is all there to succeed at the X spot. And if he's someone who is battling with Christian Moss for that starting spot on the outside, don't be shocked, because he's someone who showed great body control, great long speed, and the ability to just run crisp routes with really nice breaks in terms of timing with Damon Williams Jr. or whoever else was in there at quarterback, whether it be Kai Horton, Dash Biley, Treston Keeney McMillan. He was a guy who could absolutely be relied on. And the fact that we got to see him a little bit early on in the season against UC Davis is just one of those things where it's nice to see that he is taking those steps in the right direction. And if he's someone who just kind of bursts onto the scene in terms of he is one of the top 3 or 4 guys on this team in terms of receptions this fall, it's not going to shock me. I'm curious to see how everything plays out, because Washington just has an abundance of talent in the room, and it's going to be all about who can separate themselves this coming spring and fall. And I just think that Justice Williams has all of the traits and talent necessary to be able to do that once they put the pads on and everything like that. So those are the guys on the offensive side of the ball. As I move over to the defense, let's start in the trenches, where Omar Khan is someone I've talked about on this show for a very long time. And I still expect Washington to add at least 2 more bodies in terms of the 5 remaining spots that Jedd Fisch said the program has available to the defensive line from the transfer portal. But I think that Omar Khan is someone who can absolutely give you something this season. I'm curious to see how they want to deploy him, whether it's as a true nose tackle or as someone who, can play the 4-eye a little bit, just move around the defensive line a little bit to do what he does best, which is be a high floor run defender, because he's just so strong. You go back to his profile coming out of Texas, where he was an undefeated state champion wrestler, where he understands leverage and he understands some of the little things about playing the position so well. It's just been a matter of getting him up to weight, making sure that he is at a point where Washington can trust him consistently. And it does take a long time to develop along the defensive line sometimes. So there is some patience that's required with a guy like that. But now that he's in year 3, it's time to see more from him. And I really do believe that we're going to see that this upcoming season. The question is just going to be how much, because you go out and you add Kai McClendon and Darren Conley and Deshaun Watts to the interior of the defensive line. But even with Linnaeus Davis coming back, even with 4-star T.I.U. Mukais coming in, that's still not enough. Even adding Omar Khan and having it be those 6 guys is not enough to succeed in the Big Ten. But if he is able to take a step forward and give you something, that is a really, really great sign for where this team is going. And the way that I look at it with Ryan Walters' run defense this past year, allowing just over 100 yards per game, which was 12th in the nation, adding a guy like Omar Khan, where the profile on him, again, coming out of high school, was someone who is going to be able to stop the run and eat up blocks at a very high rate. I absolutely love how he can impact this defense. And I think that he's somebody who can absolutely continue to help elevate. I don't know if he's going to be necessarily a super impactful pass rusher right off the bat, but what he can give you on early downs as a run defender is so important. And something I'm going to be watching very closely. And on the back end, I think that Washington's top 3, maybe even 4 cornerbacks are set, depending on how you feel about Rashawn Clark moving inside and outside. But one guy who really caught my eye during spring camp and fall camp was Ramon Adams. And he's someone who, another like Omar Khan coming out of Texas, has a really nice athletic profile. He's got great length, but he came in just so far underweight at 6'1", 160 pounds. He was someone who I never expected to see very much of this year, even with Washington's just depth questions in the secondary, because he just needed to add weight. And as he continues to go through a second year in a college weight program, if he can get up to, let's just call it 180, 185, somewhere in that regard, he has the length, the movement skills, the athleticism to develop into a really solid cornerback. And he's someone who I can't say I expect him to start with Emmanuel Carnley and Dylan Robinson most likely taking up those 2 starting spots on the outside. But with how Washington prioritized him in the 2025 class, is if he's somebody who he does find his name on the depth chart come fall camp, I would not be shocked, and you shouldn't be either, because he is just one of those guys who has, again, the length, the ball skills, everything that you look for. And he's somebody who always stood out to me in terms of on the practice field because of you could hear him. And I mean that in the best way possible, because I love a corner who loves to talk a little bit of trash, and he absolutely fits that description to a T. And as just this secondary continues to shape up, where you're bringing in so much talent from the high school ranks between Rajon Duncan and Elijah Durr and Jaron Jones, who are all going to be able to give you something in the long term on the outside. If Ramon Adams is able to hold them off for an entire season because of the strides that he made between his first and second year, again, just don't be shocked. He is that kind of player, and he's someone who I think this coaching staff is really, really excited about. That's all I got for today, and I want to hear from you. Drop down in the comments below the guy on the roster that you are most excited to see just have that breakout season or take that step forward in their second, third year, whatever it might be at the college level. And until then, thank you so much to all you everydayers out there for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you like what we have to offer here on Locked On Huskies, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.